Hello and welcome back to the Arcane Forge. My name is Jess and it is Pride Month 2022 here on the Arcane Forge, and to celebrate that I am doing a month of Pride themed, queer themed content you can fit to your D&D campaigns. One of the things that I did to kind of think about that was to ask people on Discord what they wanted to see from Pride Month content, what they feel needed more representation, what they feel would be really interesting to see, what could D&D Pride be like, basically. But in terms of representation, one of the least well understood, in my opinion, sexualities in the LGBTQIA community, although there are many who don't get represented too much, are asexuals. So I want to try and incorporate and discuss asexuality in the context of D&D a little bit more, and to that end I decided to make a homebrew background, a race, a species, whatever you want to call it. Fundamentally, any player species, or rather any player character, can be asexual. That's just your choice when you write the lore of your game as a DM or when you roll up a character as a player. But when I was asking you all in Discord what you'd like to see content during Pride Month, a lot of you asked for better and more visible asexual representation, and I realised that I'd not really thought about that too much before. Colby, one of my moderators, mentioned that whenever asexuality is brought up and represented in fantasy or sci-fi setting, it tends to be swept under the rug, a tiny bit at least, by going for the lowest hanging fruit, so to speak, by representing someone who is asexual in the form of either a robot or something robot-like, perhaps some kind of alien who is fundamentally not particularly human or relatable. But asexual people exist and live perfectly lovely and relatable lives, so it seemed like a great opportunity for me to make a very relatable, very accessible type of creature in the form of a player species or race of people, a society that you can play and embody in your D&D games, for whom being asexual is a fundamental part of their existence, or the key to how their society functions somehow. People who define themselves as asexual, or ace for short, aren't necessarily anti-intimacy, anti-relationship, or even don't feel attracted to anyone at all. Asexuality, much like gender identity, is unique to every person, but is categorized by experiencing very little to no sexual attraction. This means that you might find only certain types of people attractive. It might mean that you might find people attractive but have no desire to be intimate with them. You could be interested in all sorts of different people without a defined set of characteristics that you can pinpoint, but you might also not be driven particularly by this attraction, or at least it's not a very important method by which it drives your interest in someone. You could be more comfortable being close with someone in different ways. Gender and sexuality are hard and super confusing. I don't think anyone has a super clear idea of who they are all of the time, but supposedly there are 37 or more types of attraction that someone might value more highly than sexual attraction. As a society, we are often led to believe that these are all conflated and merged together, but your attraction is valid no matter how you experience it, no matter if you've never seemed to be motivated by sexual attraction, or if you are just a little bit. But being asexual doesn't automatically mean that you have no desire whatsoever. Many asexual people still have sexual relationships and might seek them for all sorts of different reasons, but fundamentally, it seems to me at least that with an ace person, that sex isn't the driving force behind that relationship. Being ace also doesn't mean that you're aromantic. It might, but it might not be intertwined. And if you're aromantic, you might still seek out an aromantic relationship. Fundamentally, an asexual person isn't the same as a celibate person who decides to abstain from sex, which is a choice, but asexuality isn't. It's just how you feel about people and yourself, and that's absolutely okay. But fundamentally, this isn't the same as asexuality in biological terms. Asexual reproduction, which we see all the time in nature, is when a parent creates an offspring without the need for a partner. Often this is what we call a clone, because these creatures only have one set of genetic information to grow from rather than two or more, making a near-perfect variant of the original parent. There are loads of creatures who use cloning to reproduce. It's largely seen in less complicated creatures like starfish, microscopic hydras, slime molds and other things like that, but it's also common in much larger and more complex creatures like lots of sharks in captivity, but most frequently seen in zebra sharks, some types of honeybee, loads of different types of crabs asexually reproduce. Also, almost every type of plant can reproduce asexually. The interesting thing here is that there are lots and lots of creatures that we can draw inspiration from to create a homebrew homebrew species who uses asexuality and cloning as well as a part of their core fundamentals. So why would a whole species, a whole race, either need to or want to further itself, fundamentally reproduce through cloning or some other artificial means like this if there's this? Well, relationships and offspring might form in this culture, but perhaps not through cloning. Maybe it's more conventional, but maybe reproduction as we know it isn't the method by which new children created society. You might want to do this to discover ideal traits, perhaps a society who's based on law and the concept of making offspring who are best for the society as a whole, just like ants and bees. Ants and bees are very peculiar in that because they have a queen, someone that the society is based around, more genetic information is taken from the queen than are its mates, which means there's a genetic imperative to protect one creature over all the others. Ants and bees will literally throw themselves in harm's way to protect their queen. That's because they value their lives less than the queen's, genetically, inherently. This isn't something they're deciding. The queen produces more parts of the offspring than the males do. But similarly, in these types of creatures, these animals are born usually with some kind of function. There are guards who protect the queen or protect the hive or colony. There are queens who are born, who start their own hives. There are those who operate as workers, ferrying leaves and fungi and interesting foods back to the hive to feed everybody. You've probably also seen pictures of that particular type of ant who has a large kind of rimmed hat as their skull. They're born with this flat surface of their head, and their job is literally just to be the last ant in or out of the colony because their head perfectly seals the entrance or exit to the colony. So too, our society might inherently value certain traits over others. Perhaps there are numerous types of subspecies or subgroups of this player race who are all bred for a specific purpose. So maybe everyone in the society can be in relationships to any extent that they want, but they all submit DNA when they can, and an ideal mixture is made, gestated in tanks or something else, and rather than the pain and lethality of childbirth, they're born separately. So while multiple people might have offered up genetic information to create the next generation, no one has had intercourse in order to create you, say. Maybe instead of parents, there are people whose job it is, who are born to be great caregivers, or take it up as a job if they enjoy it, and raise people in a community together. Or maybe everyone pitches in, like we talked about in the Dragonborn video. So everyone is an awesome caregiver because they choose it as their job, rather than it being forced upon them if they're reluctant.
Hello, it's Future Jess here. So, sorry about the audio changes. This recording happened afterwards when I am now absolutely full of the cold. So, I will try and keep this brief, but I wanted to talk about the homebrew race that I came up with, which I called the Florendi. I said that the Florendi are a thriving species of thoughtful and logical plant-like creatures who do not leave propagation of the next generation of their people down to the whims of fate. Each Florendi adult has been raised to excel at certain skills, live in particular environments, and live their lives to the fullest. They're short, insect-like humanoids who seem to be composed of largely soft plant matter, with outer leaf-like carapace deposits which protect their organs like a powerful exoskeleton. They have long, beetle-like antlers, which they use to detect vibrations in the air, sense, detect psionic resonations, and sometimes even magic. Otherwise, their body plans vary wildly depending on what role they are born to fulfill within a given settlement. They tend to grow between 4 to 5 feet in height, measured from their feet to the crowns of their heads, but their antlers can grow 1 or 2 feet beyond that. Their soft floral flesh is a rich pink or purple colour, and their dark carapace and petals have elaborate and beautiful markings which vary from person to person. Their eyes take the form of 2 orbs of light which illuminate their shady towns like a wash of tiny stars. The Florendi are inherently an asexual species. Sexual attraction does not determine their value in a partner, and it's not how they tend to produce offspring. In Florendi culture, all adults may offer genetic information to the great generation trees at the heart of each of their towns, villages, and cities. From this genetic stock, the tree combines aspects of the genes of volunteers and germinates a new generation within itself, eventually producing enormous fruits from which the next Florendi are born. The Florendi trust that the generation tree will pick ideal traits for their next generation, combining those of numerous volunteers to produce people who are just right. The Florendi trust that the generation tree will pick ideal traits for the next generation, combining those of numerous volunteers to produce people who are just right for what the settlement needs. Some are born leaders, others great fighters, artists, and more. But all are born without the haphazard emotional involvement of two parents. That's not to say that the Florendi are emotionless, and far from it. They are creative, emotional souls who value the beauty of the world and that of nature immensely. But they don't leave children up to chance. They have complex relationships who range from the platonic to the romantic, but fundamentally do not conceive offspring this way. When a lone Florendi is not enmeshed in a society of similar creatures or simply out of the range of a generation tree, they will often clone themselves spontaneously, generating their own fruiting body on their back, which superficially resembles a snail's shell. They can deposit this fruit in the ground when it reaches a sufficient size, and a perfect duplicate of themselves will be born from it in the next spring. These clones do not have any of the memories of their parent, but will otherwise be identical to them in terms of body plan and genetics. When Florendi are born, they are akin to a human teen in intelligence and build, having gestated in a semi-conscious dreamlike state prior to hatching from their generation fruit. While gestating, their minds are psychically infused with any dreams, memories, and thoughts of their people. When grown from a generation tree, a new Florendi will have a complex mixture of inbuilt skills, generational memories, and personality traits, making them as complex as any human. But a clone Florendi tends to absorb the unconscious thoughts of their lone parent, making a new child generally tend to behave similarly to their progenitor. Florendi children reach maturity after only a handful of years, and will go on to live for 60 to 80 years before turning into a hearty mulch. Florendi societies gather this mulch and store it in enormous canopic jars, as it contains much of the genetic information of their elders. When enough mulch is collected to fill a jar, several members of a settlement will venture to a nearby glade, forest, or swamp and plant it deep in the ground. From this spot, a new generation tree will grow, and from that tree, a new settlement will emerge. The Florendi leave the decision-making properties of their next generation up to the collective mind and intentions of the generation tree. This enormous tree combines DNA traits, fragments of souls, and more to produce a whole generation of Florendi at the same time. The Florendi who are produced in this way are created to fill certain roles in their society. Some may be stronger, others better diplomats, some will become healers, caregivers, artists, and so on. Anything that the generation tree assesses that the current Florendi settlement needs to survive and thrive. While the generation tree cannot force someone to choose a career and a path for their lives, there are clear physical and mental adaptations that make certain offspring more likely to succeed in certain fields. The genetic adaptations and variations define the various sub-races of the Florendi people, which you can choose at the end of character creation. In terms of abilities, I made sure that their antlers allow them to cast Detect Magic, so that they can sense the vibrations of magic in the air. At 5th level, they gain access to a version of the Clone spell, which simulates this cloning asexual reproduction if they're away from a generation tree, and means that if they die, they can return, but they have none of their memories. Just a perfect duplicate of their body reappears. And then their various sub-races I split into certain roles that I thought seemed fitting. There's a defender, a diplomat, an explorer, a medic, and a sprouter, all gaining various spells and abilities that make them better suited to certain tasks. Defenders have a high armor class, gaining a +2 to their armor when they're not wearing any clothes, not wearing any armor. When they reach 3rd level, they gain the Shield of Faith spell, and at 5th level, they can cast Warding Bond. Diplomats automatically know the Friends cantrip, and at 3rd level, they learn how to cast Charm Person, and at 5th level, they can cast Fast Friends. Explorers gain Wings and can move as fast as they can walk, but instead using flight. At 3rd level, they gain Expeditious Retreat. 5th level, they can cast Haste as well. Medics are innately proficient in medicine, and at 3rd level can cast Healing Spirit, and at 5th can cast Aura of Vitality. And finally, Sprouters automatically know the Druidcraft cantrip, and at 3rd level can cast Speak with Plants, and at 5th level they can cast Plant Growth.
So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed learning about asexuality. If you're new to it, I hope found this species interesting. If you choose to use them, please make sure to leave that down below in the comments. I'd love to see what you guys come up with, how you use them in your campaign worlds. If you think this is an interesting idea, it certainly was interesting for me, and I really liked what we came up with. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a little like so that we can help to defeat the YouTube algorithm. I hope if you really enjoyed this, you will recommend either this video or your favorite video to of your friends so that we can help to grow the channel, because we are only tiny little antlings ourselves, I guess, to grow up. And until next time, happy Pride, stay safe, you are valid, you are loved, and happy monster hunting.